Mr. Speaker, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
Thought for the week, Proverbs 4:5-9 says, "Get wisdom, get understanding, do not forget my words or swerve from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. Wisdom is supreme, therefore. Get wisdom, though it cost all you have. Get understanding. Esteem her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She shall give to thine head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory shall she deliver to thee." James 1:5. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we enter your gates with thanksgiving and your courts with praise. Now, Father, you said, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach. Grant to our leaders wisdom beyond their years. 6 things your chaplain is praying for our Prime Minister, his cabinet and backbenchers, and opposition members. 1, that they would recognize their own need to depend on God for knowledge, wisdom, and for the courage to do what is right. 2, that they would reject all counsel that violates righteousness and resist all pressure to violate their own conscience. 3, I pray that they would rely upon prayer and the Word of God as their source of daily strength, wisdom, and courage. 4, I pray that they would bring dignity, honor, trustworthiness, and integrity to the office that they hold. 5, I pray that they would remember to be good examples in their conduct to the people of the Bahamas, who look to them for leadership. 6, I pray that they would be reminded daily that they are accountable to Almighty God for the decisions that they make. And 7th, I add, I pray that violence against our women, old and young, will come to an end throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Now, likewise, I pray for our opposition members led by Honorable Brave Davis, the insights and fortitude that they shall keep our governing members accountable for their actions, ensure that serious matters shall be resolved quickly, not forgetting the statutory head of our nation, Governor General Dame Marguerite Pinling. Grant her your grace and mercy and strength to continue to lead our nation in a manner worthy of praise. Finally, I pray for the protection and well-being of the spouses and families of our honorable members. Preserve the health of our honorable members, their bodies, and vigor of their minds. Shower down on them and the thousands they here represent such temporal blessings as thou seest expedient for them in this world, and crown them with everlasting glory in the world to come. All this we ask in the name and through the merits of Jesus Christ, thy Son, and our Savior, who taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not in temptation, but deliver us. For thine is the kingdom, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. When the business of the House suspended, we were at first reading of bills in the order of business. But just before we proceed, I wish to bring your attention to some communications that I've received. The first being the National Women's Week 2017 will be commemorated from Sunday, the 26th of November, to Saturday, the 9th of December, under the theme, Strong Women, Strong Families, Strong Communities. At this time, we also like to recognize the presence of a contingent of women headed by Mistress Cora Colebrook, the Acting Permanent Secretary, the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development, Miss Gaynell Curry, the Director of the Department of Gender and Family Affairs, Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development, and Miss Coralie Adderley, the Chairperson of the National Women Advisory Council, and members of the council. Could you please stand for us? Thank you. At this time, I would call on the member for Seabreeze, the minister with responsibility, who would bring some information with respect to the events on this particular week that has been a specially ordained week for the recognition of our women.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Can I have the podium, please? Thank you. Mr. Speaker, honorable members of the House, this morning, together and in the presence of members of the National Women's Council and personnel from the Department of Gender and Family Affairs, Mr. Speaker, today I am pleased and indeed privileged to launch National Women's Week 2017, which begins on Sunday, the 26th November 2017. Normally, Mr. Speaker, this time of celebration would last for 7 days, 1 week. This year, for the first time, I'm told, in history, we have extended it to 2 weeks, 14 days, Mr. Speaker. This would ensure... This would ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we reach a wider group of women and that non-governmental organizations and other partners have the opportunity to carry out their events to commemorate this special occasion, including our sisters in the Family Islands. Mr. Speaker, I've come to realize very early that when it comes to women, when one is affected, all is affected. And so on Sunday past, I would have attended along with the Zonta Club of Nassau, Zonta Clubs of the Bahamas, church service held at Zion Baptist Church. Women came in solidarity to stand up and say no to violence against women. I had the opportunity to bring brief remarks, Mr. Speaker, and it was there that I indicated that we as women can not only say no, but it is important that we show no. And we show no by standing together. We show no by letting our voices be heard and continuing to make the call and the stand for equality for all, and to stand up and show no to violence of every and any kind. Mr. Speaker, I concluded in indicating to them that when violence affects one of us, it indeed affects all of us. Mr. Speaker, 55 years ago, women in the Bahamas voted for the first time equally alongside men. This propels the great journey for women in political life, a journey that has resulted with many women attaining high political office and other leadership roles in various spheres across the country. Today, I and my female parliamentarians stand here or sit here because others stood in the gap. And we have a duty to do the same for those that will come after us. Mr. Speaker, we stand on the shoulders of women like Mary Ingram, Georgiana Simonette, Eugenia Lockhart, Harriet MacDonald, Mabel Walker, and Dr. Doris Johnson, who championed, and I want to say together, championed the fight for universal suffrage in the country and for enhanced opportunities for women. While we stand on their shoulders, we stand on what I have crafted, the leadership foundation of honorable women such as Janet Boswick, the Honorable Ivy Dumont, Italia Johnson, Teresa Moxie Ingram, Loretta Butler Turner, Mother Cynthia Pratt, Glenys Hannah Martin, Melanie Griffin, Lady Sharon Wilson, and a host of other female leaders who have and continue to embed indelible marks in the history of our parliament and indeed our country, and I want to extend here and say the world. Mr. Speaker, National Women's Week is an opportunity to celebrate these achievements. It is also an occasion where we must remind ourselves that while we are not there yet, we are well on the way. The theme for National Women's Week is this, Mr. Speaker: strong women, strong families, strong communities. This theme conveys the central role of women in both the private and public spheres, and their determination, or rather our determination, to work together with our male counterparts to build healthy, safe, and cohesive families and communities. Mr. Speaker, we are all here to build a better Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I am grateful that the female parliamentarians of both the upper and lower house, and that is this House of Assembly and the Senate, have reposed confidence in me to serve as the chairman of the Bahamas branch of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarian Association of the Americas and the Atlantic region. On part of the festivities of National Women's Week, as a part of it, the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians will hold an introductory luncheon at Luciano's Restaurant, West Bay Street, on Monday, the 4th of December, 2017. This luncheon will be held for sitting female parliamentarians and the wives of all male parliamentarians. By now, Mr. Speaker, I'm informed that all of the wives of the male parliamentarians should have received their invitations. Mr. Speaker, we're coming together because when we say when it comes to issues as it relates to women, we will be on one accord, united, and in solidarity. That's how we roll. Mr. Speaker, we are going to have a number of activities to highlight women and to bring to the attention of the public at large issues that are affecting this category of persons in the community. Mr. Speaker, I would like to invite the honorable members to join the Department of Gender and Family Affairs in marking the International Day on the Elimination of Violence Against Women that is normally identified or recognized on the 24th of November every year, Mr. Speaker. And we're asking them to wear orange on that day, Mr. Speaker, as we have now, we have our orange pins on, and so, Mr. Speaker, we want persons to wear orange. The orange pins you've received today are to be worn every day if you can from the 24th November until the 10th of December 2017, which is the duration of the 16 days of activism to end violence against women in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to welcome here today members of the newly appointed National Women's Advisory Council. This council is tasked with assisting the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development, in particular the Department of Gender and Family Affairs, in monitoring the status of women in the Bahamas. In this context, they provide recommendations for improvements to legislation that affect women, their families, and communities, in addition to recommending programs that will enhance females at every level. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important here to say that formerly the Department of Gender and Family Affairs was termed the Department or the Women's Bureau. And Mr. Speaker, while at that department at one point focused primarily on issues affecting females only, it has been expanded to include families, and so now it is the Department of Gender and Family Affairs. And so, Mr. Speaker, in taking an holistic approach to issues that affect women and family, which includes boys and children and men, Mr. Speaker, our mandate is no more only to focus on one group, but all individuals who may be marginalized and who may be abused in any way, Mr. Speaker. The National Women's Advisory Council, and so we're looking at, I think there has been some movement to include males by some means on this council, which may, be both the women and men National Advisory Council, so that we can include all, or Family Advisory Council, but nevertheless, the start has been a great one. And so the council is headed by Mrs. Coralie Adderley, and she is a certified healthcare executive and fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. Mrs. Adderley's career has allowed her to work in the public and private sector healthcare systems in the Bahamas and United States for over 25 years. Mr. Speaker, I am persuaded that Mrs. Adderley will indeed provide the necessary guidance and 21st century approach necessary to advance the work, the service, and the role of women in our country. And Mr. Speaker, she is supported by a team of intelligent women of integrity and women who are well respected throughout this country, Mr. Speaker. And so our National Women's Advisory Council, Mr. Speaker, I can say here, is in excellent hands. Mr. Speaker, the activities for the month, just so that it is announced here, we held our press conference already, and that was quite successful. We went on Bahamas at sunrise, Mr. Speaker, already Friday past. There is a movie, Mix and Mingle, workshop for women and their children in Abaco, and so we've also included, Mr. Speaker, the Family Islands as well in these activities. There is an essay competition in Grand Bahama. The Zonta Clubs of Nassau, they held their church service on Sunday, and we were a part of it. We will be erecting portraits of suffragettes, influential women in the Bahamas in Rawson Square for next week, Wednesday, when we sit, Mr. Speaker. And National Women's Week audio recording. The Zonta Clubs of the Bahamas orange ribbon tying on Village Road will be held on the 21st of November, already held. Presentation to parliamentarians, and that was done today, the orange ribbons and T-shirts. And then we have the Good Morning Bahamas. We're going to be on the Dion Morris Show. We have the T-shirt day in Abaco on the 24th November. Delta Sigma, Theta, Sorority Incorporated, free basic self-defense class. Mr. Speaker, we need to know how to defend ourselves, and it's called The Right to Defend. We're doing that at Holy Cross Anglican Hall. Mr. Speaker, Zonta Clubs of the Bahamas Community Outreach will have a walk, a day in my shoes, at the mall at Marathon on the 25th of November. On the 25th as well, International Day, we began that day for the elimination of violence against women. They started that in Abaco. National Women's Week Church service will be held, Trinity, Holy Trinity, on this Sunday, Stapleton Gardens, and I indeed will be there to bring my remarks and that we start off in a time of praise and thanksgiving for where we are, where we came from, and indeed as women and as a country where we are going. On the 28th of November will be the CEDAW report sharing, and that will be held in the hearing room of the Department of Physical Planning at Ministry of Social Services. On the 28th, we will have GirlCon, and in Freeport, it's a girl conference for young girls to encourage them how to conduct themselves, how to deport themselves, and how to be a part of the development of the country and to make their mark and play their role. Doris Johnson, on the 29th, we will have our Women's Week observation, and a number of female parliamentarians, Mr. Speaker, has agreed to go into the schools during the assembly period, and they will speak to young girls and the school at large during that period. And so I do applaud the cooperation of the women for that, Mr. Speaker. I think it's really commendable. On the 29th, the presentation at primary school, there will be a presentation on bullying and then dating and recognizing signs of an abuser. And then on the 1st and 2nd of December, Bahama Isles Innovative Technology Solutions Multipurpose Cooperative Limited seminar on women and construction. Then we have a seminar on understanding domestic violence and its impact. Invitees in Abaco, again in Abaco, they have a prayer breakfast, community walkabouts. We have community walkabouts in the community, Mr. Speaker, to bring awareness to issues facing women and to hear what concerns women in the community have. And I note that Urban Renewal has agreed to play a very intricate and important role in getting the message out in the communities at large and particularly in urban communities. There will be, Mr. Speaker, also a luncheon for the female parliamentarians and wives of all male parliamentarians as indicated. And I want to say that the wife of our Honorable Prime Minister has agreed to be our keynote speaker at that event. And so we are indeed delighted and happy to have her share with us. And then we have a women's forum, You Talk, We Listen, and that is where I will be, Mr. Speaker, at the University of the Bahamas. And we've invited women from all walks of life, from every sector to come, and we will share in issues and we will interact with one another at the university. And that's also why they're going out in the community, is to ensure that we not only have college students there or university students, but persons from throughout the country. Women are going to come and we're going to hear them. It's called You Talk and We Listen. And then on the 6th is a barbershop talk, men's panel, violence against women. They said when you want to hear everything, you go in the barbershop. So we're bringing the barbershop to us. So we want to know what goes on there, and we want to make our voices heard. And then on the 8th of December, Mr. Speaker, we're going to climax these events with a minister's reception, and that will be for as many women leaders will be invited, permanent secretaries, honorable judges, members of the House, and we're bringing all women leaders together, Mr. Speaker, under one accord. Mr. Speaker, this is a non-partisan approach. When it comes to issues facing women, like I said, when it affects one of us, it affects all of us. And so, Mr. Speaker, every female has been invited, the members of all the major political parties as well. They have been invited to the various events, and I think it's important to indicate that, and not only to say what we're doing, but to show that, in fact, we are committed. Mr. Speaker, I again take this opportunity to invite the honorable members of this House to join the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development and all the women of the Bahamas in commemorating National Women's Week 2017 and to join us in as many of these activities. Mr. Speaker, I tell you that we are here for a reason, and I've been placed here for a time, and certainly I will do what I can while I can to advance the role of women and the agenda of this government, which is to put the people of the Bahamas where they need to be in the forefront of the minds of its leaders. Mr. Speaker, this is the government I've dreamt about, and this is the government that's now here in reality. Mr. Speaker, they say it's the people's time.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I'm also in receipt of another communication that I wish to bring to your attention, and that communication is dealing with the official funeral for Sir Arlington G. Butler, former cabinet minister and parliamentarian and Speaker of this Honorable House of Assembly. Please be advised that an official funeral for the late Sir Arlington G. Butler, KCMG, former cabinet minister and parliamentarian, will be held on Friday, the 24th of November, that is this Friday, at 11 a.m. at Christ Church Cathedral, George and King Streets. The interment will follow in Lakeview Memorial Gardens on John F. Kennedy Drive. Please be further advised that the body will lie in state on Thursday, the 23rd of November, 2017, in the foyer of the Honorable House of Assembly until Friday, the 24th of November, when it will depart the House of Assembly for the church. And while we are dealing with these sad matters as it relates to the passing of some icons in our nation, I also wish to ask you for a moment of silence on the passing of one of our cultural icons, Ronnie Butler. Can I get a minute of silence, a moment of silence? Thank you, honorable members. You know, Ronnie Butler was one of my favorite Bahamian artists. I fell in love with his Crow Calypso song. And of course, I also loved his Bahama rock song. And more recently, I fell in love with his Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. Only if that was true. Honorable colleagues, before we proceed, I have had a notice and a request by the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island, who wish to raise a point of privilege. And I have conditionally acceded to his request. And so the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on November 15, 2017, it is my view that my privilege was breached when the member for East Grand Bahama indicated that I falsely attributed comments to him that he did not make, whilst I have, in fact, verifiable evidence that he did, in fact, make such statements. Mr. Speaker, I take any assertion that I intentionally mislead as an affront. I vowed to my constituents that I will take my job here very seriously and perform it to the very highest standards. So in response to my press release, where I supported the Prime Minister's speech, where he committed to moving to accrual basis by 2022, and I also questioned the inconsistency of the minister with respect to accounting treatment, he responded, and I quote, "This is not about accounting or accounting treatment." Further in his communication, he said, I never said that it was on the accrual basis. I said we are moving towards the accrual basis. Mr. Speaker, I now lay on the table the Tribune dated August 28, 2017, which I adopt. The headline was Moody's warning on 636 deficit. The subheadlines were rating agency forecasts 136 million higher than government as DPM defends deficit accounting method switch, move from accounting base to accrual inflates red ink. This is the story that I accept, Mr. Speaker, and I lay this on the table today. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. So I lay this on the table.
That's what he said, man. Nice. He said that. Let's get the transcript.
The article,
Okay, you're explaining the truth.
is distinctly different from the members' comments on November 15th. The article quotes, KP Turnquest said, Moody's decision to leave the Bahamas with investment grade rating was vindication of the Minnis administration's sudden shift to accrual basis of accounting for the 2016-2017 fiscal year. Now, during the minister's communication on November 15, 2017, Mr. Speaker, he named me on several occasions whilst making the referenced assertions. But then he strenuously objected to my right to speak to defend myself. Mr. Speaker, I take my obligations in this honorable chamber very seriously. I did not, and I will never knowingly make false assertions against any member, much less my friend from East Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, now let me be clear that I will not belabor the substance of the points, except to say, as I did in my budget presentation, that I support an orderly and transparent shift to the accrual basis in line with the Prime Minister's 2022 target. Mr. Speaker, I intend to make no further statements on this matter, here or otherwise. There are more pressing matters that Bahamian people are gravely concerned about, including the economy, crime, and job creation. These are matters affecting many hurting Bahamian families. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will continue to speak on behalf of the good people of Exumas and Ragged Island, whom I am duly elected to represent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island, are you intending to have this matter, are you seeking to have this matter sent on to the committee?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the communication be brought up.
We shouldn't make that commitment. We have to continuously put the spotlight on that.
No.
Because see, that is their whole basis
No,
for duplicity.
what's going to happen is he keeps talking.
Order that the document do lie on the table. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I certainly want to get a copy of the claim for a breach of privilege, which, from what I read, what I heard, I don't know where that breach of privilege occurred. And so I'm looking forward to the matter going to the Committee of Privilege. But I just want to make this one point, Mr. Speaker. It is not within the minister's sole discretion to change the basis of accounting for the government. Further, there has been no change in the basis of accounting. And I think I've made that very clear in this place over and repeatedly. So I don't understand what the member's talking about. So I'm looking forward to it so that we can clarify what it is that I said and what he thinks he heard. And I'm not going to be responsible, Mr. Speaker, for anything that the press may have written. If it's not a quote from me, I do not claim it. And so I'm looking forward, Mr. Speaker, to this matter going to committee, because again, I think the member ought to have clarity, because obviously he still misunderstands what I said and what the facts are.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair will investigate this matter. I'm going to also request copies of the Hansard and to examine the evidence to see whether or not a prima facie case has been established on the point of privilege, and if the chair decides that a prima facie case has been established, the matter will be referred to the Committee on Privilege. However, if the chair determines that the evidence does not support a prima facie case, the chair will rule accordingly and the matter will be put to rest. That is the position of the chair at the moment until we have been able to glean sufficient evidence to make a determination on whether or not a prima facie case has been established. Thank you very much. Honorable members, when the business of the House suspended, we were at first reading of bills. Any further first reading of bills? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
No further first reading of bills, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Second reading and committal of bills.
May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
At this time.
Just a moment, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Care Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
I could beg the indulgence of the government with respect to the proposed debate on the commercial enterprise bill. Speaker, we on this side have had opportunity to review this bill, and it has very far-reaching consequences. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the effect of the bill reverses a long-standing governmental policy that has been embraced by both sides over the many, many years. Not just this side, but both sides. And I would have thought, Mr. Speaker, that I'm inviting the government to consider giving this bill, deferring this debate, to ensure more and deeper consultation in respect to the far-reaching consequences that this bill will have at the end of the day. Huh? Policy change?
Honorable member.
If they want, I could tell you what I think.
Honorable member.
Yes, I'm inviting them to consider not debating at this time.
Is it the opposition's position, honorable member, that you need more time to review, or you weren't given sufficient time?
I think engagement of the Bahamian people in respect to the consequences of this bill is required, because they have a deep vested interest. If it is the people's time, the people ought to have more say in this bill.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Mr. Speaker, this bill was laid for first reading on the 18th of October, nearly 1 month ago, more than 1 month ago. There has been, and it has been publicized by Prime Minister and various ministers, and has been, so to come at this stage to seek an adjournment or a postponement is not acceptable, Mr. Speaker.
The member has misunderstood the point. We are ready to debate the bill. But we are concerned, Mr. Speaker, we are concerned, having looked at the bill, that not sufficient consultation has been, NGOs and others have not had the opportunity to understand the impact and effect of this bill. That's what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, and if they wish...
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it is
Honor-
second reading, and we're moving on.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have reached now second reading of the bill. The member had sufficient time to review the bill, whatever comments he has. Now that he is in Parliament, he can bring that forth during his debate. Each and every one of them has made statement that they will debate, so they have the opportunity.
Yes. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamakro.
With your leave, Mr. Speaker.
No,
Honorable member.
Speaker, no.
With
Honorable
your leave,
member.
Mr. Speaker.
I have given you your opportunity.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker.
I've given you your opportunity.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
The
With your leave.
honorable member for Yamakro. Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker.
We've received the point you made.
Mr. Speaker.
We've received the point you made on this matter.
Yes.
The chair recognizes the honorable member.
Thank you. A simple amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, resume your seat.
Yes. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, with your leave, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to begin. Mr. Speaker, I rise to begin debate on the commercial enterprise bill. Mr. Speaker, with your
honorable members.
Am I going to get back the time? Am I going to get back the time, Mr.
Honorable
Speaker?
members.
I need my time
permit
back.
the member for Yamakro to proceed.
Yes, I'm going to.
Honorable member for Yamakro, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to begin debate on the commercial enterprise bill. But with your leave, Mr. Speaker, I would like, on behalf of the great constituency of Yamakro, to concur with the sentiments made by the honorable member for Sea Breeze. Mr. Speaker, I quite recall that when I was in university, I was introduced to an excellent book. I think the author was Edith Clark, entitled My Mother Who Fathered Me. And it spoke, it spoke to the history of women in the Caribbean diaspora and the sacrifices they made during slavery, coming out of slavery, in an attempt to take care of their families. Mr. Speaker, and so today I would like to pay respects to all of the women in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, because I too was raised in a family led by women. At age 4, I was sent to Kid Island to be with my grandmother. and to say I see Michael's mother sitting here today, and I'd like to honor her and all women. And when I see what Longfellow describes, yes, Cat Island, as works of love, Longfellow says that he is no true man who ever treat women with anything but the most profound respect. And she is no true woman, and I'm happy that we have women here who are teaching women how to ensure and guarantee that not just men, but women in society treat them with respect. And he says the rivalry of the sexes is the sheriffs of folly. And he goes on to say that women are genius, and the works of that genius, those geniuses, are works of love. And we've seen that throughout our young history as a community in the Bahamas. And so I want to congratulate these women. I'm grateful for my orange badge. And I'd like to say that Yamakro is on board. What we're doing in Yamakro is we're being contemporary and cutting edge. And so on Monday evening, our constituency association, we're inviting some persons from the Department of Gender and Family to speak on the issue of preventing violence against women. Because I'm quite certain Mr. Marvin James would tell you, the Minister of National Security, that at one stage, if not now, the reason for our high homicide rates is because women are being hurt. And when you have hurt women, you have hurt sons. When you have hurt sons, you have hurt daughters. And so I concur with Longfellow, when he speaks to God, creation of a genius. And then he moves on from that genius and say that the works of that genius are works of love. And when I think about the works of love, it takes me back to my grandmother. When she turned cornmeal grivels for me, and I spoke to a blessed lady this morning in the presence of my aunt, who is still on Cat Island. And later on today, I'm going to call my mother and tell her how much I love her. And so I want to tell you that I love you. And so my father taught me, he says, Ellsworth, you must always conduct yourself with style and class. And so on standing, I could say nothing else but first to recognize these honorable women among us. Thank you very much, and may God continue to bless you. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not speak or express condolences on behalf of the great constituency of Yamakro on the passing of Sir Allington Butler. My prayers are with his family, that God will continue to bless them during this time of his bereavement. Also, a gentleman that's near and dear to my heart, in the person of Mr. Ronnie Butler, for his contribution to the history of the Bahamas. The anthropologists, their jobs have been made easy because of his ability, because of his genius to write the songs that he wrote. And so I know that my uncle who's in Cat Island, as I think about going down Burma Road, he's probably thinking about drive it home as he sits in Cat Island. And so I am grateful for Mr. Ronnie Butler, and I pray God that his soul would rest in peace. Well, yes. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, in speaking to the Commercial Enterprise Bill, I know that there are those who have indicated that the Dr. Hubert Minnis-led government lacks vision, that it lacks enterprise. But I'm here before I go into it to speak to this bill and to speak of the reasoning of this bill and how this bill is an integral part of the foundation that this government is laying to create not just local confidence and investment in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, but international confidence for investors to feel confident to come into the Bahamas. And I say that in the context, Mr. Speaker, as I have said before, that the American government, the IDB, and I think it is the IMF, has expressed extreme concern about the way that we do business in the Bahamas. As a matter of fact, because of what they've expressed, because of what we've heard from local investors and international investors, it has led us to lay a number of bills that deals with corruption and transparency in government. So we've passed in this House, we've passed the DPP bill. There's the Ombudsman bill that we've laid, the Integrity Commission bill, which deals with code of conduct for persons in Parliament, and for senior persons within the public sector. And then there is the Proceedings of Crime Act that will look through, and I always like to say this, that will look at unexplained wealth, right? And also it will say how that we have to report on our assets once a year. And so, Mr. Speaker, the enterprise bill is another layer in it in terms of how business will be done in the Bahamas. Now, I heard the sentiments expressed by the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkins, and Salvador, that the members opposite would not have had time to consider, did not want to, well, in essence, they needed more time to consider, and they had concerns. They had concerns that the public wants more time. But Mr. Speaker, well, let me say this. I was able to download a copy of the bill from the international web. When I spoke, on the last occasion when I spoke to the DPP bill and the pensions bill, I made it clear, lucidly clear, that these bills will be placed either on the AG's website, or you can go and you can download it so that you can have an opportunity to consider the bill. In the circumstances, I would like to commend Mr. Matt Albury and his group, who would have done so and who would have sent in their recommendations in time for the bill. And so NGOs, civil society, have had an opportunity to look at the bill. Not only look at the bill, Mr. Speaker, they've made certain contributions and say that the bill is proactive, it is conventional, and that it does a lot to create an environment for investment and for causing the Bahamian people in terms of business to be able to self-determine, and an environment where we don't leave it to your imagination as it has been done before, but we put it in legislation so the international investor could know these are the terms of the agreement. The Bahamian who is to be trained or who will be involved, he knows what is the nature of the legislation. Not only that, because it's being put into legislation, it's also justiciable. So if anybody has a difficulty about the legislation, you can look at it. Whenever I speak, Mr. Speaker, and I've gone to it just now, I always speak to history. And the history of the Bahamas is one when we first took power, well, when majority rule came into effect, and we had the first Minister of Education in Sir Wallace Whitfield, was to look at education. And so his concentration then, as it is now, is to look at Bahamianization and how, through education, we can bring our people to a level where they can fully participate in the economic and social and political life of this country. And so that process started with one of the founding fathers, of our great party. And so, Mr. Speaker, I go into the commercial enterprise bill. And as I said, I commended the civil society group for their description of the bill, in calling the bill timely. Mr. Speaker, the commercial enterprise bill, to my mind, also, and sometimes when I speak to, I sometimes misquote the Constitution when I look at the preamble, and sometimes I misquote industry for enterprise. But in these circumstances, Mr. Speaker, we are creating an environment where Bahamians can participate through industry or enterprise within the economic life of this country. And by the legislation, Mr. Speaker, that we're laying, we're also speaking to the ease of doing business. You know, I went to a conference on last week for corporate lawyers in Florida, and they were speaking about the OECD and a number of other issues. And this lady from one of the lesser Caribbean islands, she spoke to me and she says, "Ellsworth, what's happening with your registry?" Lesser Antilles, thank you very much. And so I asked her, "What do you mean?" She said, we are making application for IPs in the Bahamas, and it's taking very long. And so it's causing persons who may want to invest in the Bahamas to leave. And then she was able to identify someone who they were working with in the Bahamas. In the person, I think I have liberty to call her name, in the person of Ms. Katina Moscow. And I recall Ms. Katina Moscow when I was at the bar, speaking about the registry and what we need to do to make the registry of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas contemporary. So that when persons apply for business, and we got into a discourse, so that when persons apply for a company or business license, they don't have to wait 2 months, 3 months, or even more than that, or for a non-profit. And so we went into the discourse, and I had to go into the discourse with her about how long it will take in the Cayman Islands, where we have people wanting to participate in the economic life of the Bahamas. And so in less than a week, you can get some of these documents and be on your way to investing in those other countries. And so I said to her, what I want you to do is to condescend your concerns in writing and send them to me. But what I reassured her of this government's agenda is we're now assessing the public service, and the registries, which is responsible for licenses, is a part of the public service. When we're assessing it for its efficiencies and lack thereof, to bring these institutions to a point where, just like in the Cayman Islands or Bermuda or wherever you go, you can get services can be provided that are efficient, timely, and effective, and that will result in the economic viability of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, as I go through the bill, there is also an amendment bill that we will deal with in committee, but I will condescend. There's 2 minor amendments. I will condescend to the amendments during my contributions to the bill. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, the bill is termed the Commercial Enterprise Bill. It speaks to the setup or the reasoning behind the commercial enterprise in the Bahamas. And the interpretation section speaks to in-house professionals, those persons who have special professional expertise, or business person. That's in section 2. Yes, ma'am. In-house professionals who will be allowed to come in and do certain work. And Mr. Speaker, when you look at places like Bahama, let's say Bahama, Sun Atlantis, and certain other multinational entities that come into the Bahamas, let's just think about the oil company that ran in the 70s in Freeport, Borco. You're setting up, you're bringing in millions of dollars. There are certain expertise that you allow, or the country will allow for you to bring in. So it's based on the spirit. That section there in terms of in-house professionals is based on that. And then it looks at the investment board. The minister, who is the minister under the act? A person under the act, a plan, persons would be, so you just can't, this act and I will go to it, will not just allow someone to come into the Bahamas without producing a proper plan. Pardon me? A business plan for what they want to do in the Bahamas. Gone are the days when you can just come in with your briefcase or come in and do something and just set up a business without first persons assessing what is the nature of the business that you're going to do. because you are very well aware we're being assessed internationally. So we want to be assured that the persons who are coming in, they're not money launderers, they're not traffickers, they're not using these businesses for terrorism financing. So you will find in the bill that there will be a requirement for financial transaction reporting, and they have to be in keeping with international standards and with the legislations that we are putting before Parliament. So these are fit and proper, credible persons that we are inviting to the Bahamas to do business. As I said before, Mr. Speaker, this is not unusual. As a matter of fact, as I said, and I always base my presentations in history, when there was first majority rule, one of the things that the then government had to do was to assure investors and assure persons who were then in the Bahamas that the Bahamas was good for business. And that is why we were able to establish a lively and vibrant tourism sector. That is why we were able to establish a lively and vibrant financial services sector by inviting persons to the Bahamas. Unfortunately, because of the way that we have done business over the past, some persons have decided to leave. And we've had one unfortunate experience, I think, where my leader had to get involved. Upstanding business person, turned away, frustrated, who's here for no other reason because of his love for the Bahamas and his desire to invest in this country. And if we can find persons like that to come in, we are going to accept them and we're going to treat them with respect. But there's a contingent to that, Mr. Speaker, as I go through the legislation. There's an obligation in the spirit of Bahamianization to train Bahamians. There's an obligation, Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of Bahamianization to recognize Bahamian talents. But there has to be a little give and take, where, as I said before, and this is not new. When Bahama came in, there were certain professionals we took in, but it has to be monitored. And so section 4 of the Act, Mr. Speaker, speaks to specified commercial enterprises and how they may be set up in the Bahamas. And it says, a specified commercial enterprise is, and as I said to you, there's an amendment, is a Bahamian. It's a non-Bahamian with an investment of not less than $250,000. So we have created a distinction. So in that zone, or wherever the zone is, a Bahamian with less than $250,000 can invest and open a business and also receive the very same perks or incentives. As a matter of fact, they could do it now anywhere in the Bahamas. And also it allows Bahamians to go into joint ventures. And so it creates an environment, Mr. Speaker, where the Bahamians are not sitting in the back seat, but they're able to drive side to side. But even more importantly, they're guiding it through this legislation, because the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Immigration, and the Investment Board is able to monitor this entire process. Section 2 says that a specified commercial enterprise may conduct business from any location in the Bahamas. It gives the power to the minister to create regulations and also to create economic incentives to drive. Now, I'm going to go to the schedule, which will specify the areas that we're intending to attract to the Bahamas. And we are intending to attract these people to the Bahamas in the context where you have a Proceeds of Crime Act, that the 10% and the 20% days is gone. Public officials are no longer allowed to take something for themselves because you're being paid. They're being invited to a Bahamas in the context where you have an integrity commission bill that requires certain things of our public officials, and no less a person, from the top down, the Prime Minister, or if you want to say from the ground up, from me. And when I put myself from the ground up. I'm below the janitors. Because the good master say, if you want to lead, what you must be? A servant. And the best way to lead is to serve. And when you're serving, yes. Thank you very much. I know, okay, right now. Yes. And so the Act established a board that will consider the applications, right? But it also, the board, when you produce the plan that I would have spoken of, and I want to read section 5 too, it says, every application shall be in the prescribed form as shown in the schedule, in the second schedule, and accompanied by a business plan which indicates with specificity the nature of the purpose of the proposed commercial enterprise, its staffing needs, inclusive of number of work permits which may be required, and such training and capacity building opportunities as may be agreed to be afforded to Bahamians in respect of positions staffed by work permit holders. And so it takes into consideration, I remember I was listening to a lady. A lady is near and dear to my heart, one of my mentors. And she recalled the days when we first took majority rule. And she says, you know, Ellsworth, a part of the philosophy of giving a work permit was that it was to create capacity. In order for the renewal of that work permit, you have to show a part of it, who have you trained? That's a part of the assessment that will be ongoing for the renewal. The nature of the training. Who have you produced? And we call that mentorship. When my Prime Minister speaks, he says to his ministers, in these ministries, there is succession planning. Who are the young people? So you'll find that young people are involved in almost everything. Conferences, get them the invitations. Because our stay here, I think, and I know that he appreciates this, is but a vapor. And so we must pour all that we have into those who are around us so that we can take this on. And so, in keeping with that philosophy and that ideology, to strengthen the Bahamians and to bring them along with us, as intentioned by one of our freedom fighters, Sir Cecil Wallace Whitfield, we are putting in writing the concept of Bahamianization in business. So, and I said earlier that it's justiciable. That if a Bahamian believes that someone isn't doing something right, they can go to court on the legislation. I know the unions, they're active, and that's a part of their thing. Collymore and the Queen basically speaks to them and gives them legitimization. There can be activism surrounding this. If you think that someone has come, and you can write to the Ministry of Immigration, and they're not doing as they should. This is what is called Bahamianization, putting people first. And when I read this, it took me to Bermuda, where they just passed a piece of legislation, looking at Bermudans, how they support, how they secure, not only economic activity for them, but even land. And that takes me to another, and just allow me to segue into a town meeting that will be held on the 29th, Wednesday, in the Yamacraw community. And I'd invited the member for Angleston. We'll be honoring her father. And we'll speak to land reform in the 21st century, the proposed land bill, and are they contemporary? And I want to thank the speakers for volunteering to be a part of that process. Mr. Elliott Lockhart, QC, Bria, and a number of other persons have agreed to come together and speak pointedly to the issue of land reform. And so Section 6 goes on to the Commercial Enterprise Board and what its obligations are to ensure that the process is transparent, it's accountable, that the proposed business plan is what it says it is. It is meticulous, and it will ensure that only upright persons who have the best interests of the Bahamas in mind will be allowed in to conduct business within the economic zone. Okay, yes. Thank you very much. And so that is the intention. And once the board is satisfied, after all the due diligence, that this company or this person is a fit and proper person, they will issue a certificate. Now, the application for the work permits must come along with the certificate. So this is not a process where you go to immigration, you say, I'm here to do business. Please give me the work permits, and I want to come and set up. No. Persons, and once that document, because my Prime Minister, just this week, yesterday, questioned the Honorable Kyle, and I like to say this word, Wilshire Bethel, about the Freedom of Information Act. And asked him, and how far it is. And we are moving quickly to select a commissioner. And a part of that process will be in consultation with civil society. And so why I brought that up is because the plan may be a plan that persons in the community can inspect. Because for too long, the people's business has been a secret. And through the Freedom of Information Act, we will ensure that this process is timely, it's transparent, and we're accountable. And so as I speak to this legislation, yes, by the end of the year, I just want persons watching by way of television and in the audience to get the picture, the paradigm that is being created. An environment in the Bahamas where people could feel safe to bring their assets in. When they do their risk assessment, there's a free, impartial, and independent court that they can go to. Now, when you see me go to Mr. Speaker, when I go to the schedule, we speak about arbitration. Because one of these things people look to see in their risk assessment is, if there's problems, what do I do? What do I do? And this act engenders that. It involves Bahamians. It gives them an opportunity to go to the court and question certain things. Please, people, I know what you've heard earlier, but you can go on the web and you can download these acts. And I'll say it again, any bit of legislation that we lay in this house, it's to go on the website. That's the mandate of my leader, so that the people could see it. And you have an opportunity then to assess it. And not only that, you have an opportunity to send to the Attorney General's office your suggestions. Yes. And they will be approved. So you see how it comes about. You make the application. We ensure that these are fit and proper persons to be in the Bahamas. They must say how it will benefit Bahamians. It will say how it will benefit Bahamians. And more importantly, the certificate is for 1 year, the work permit is for 3 years. Mr. Speaker, if you are coming in, just allow, if you are coming in to invest, let's say, a Bahama or whatever, and you're investing $5 million or whatever, millions of dollars, anybody who understands business, and when I went into private practice, Justice Thomas would always tell me, say, man, this is like a baby. You got at least 3-4 years for this to get up. So they're coming in and they're building the business. They're bringing in the subsidiary. They're getting those persons. Sometimes it takes more than a year. But you have the oversight. There's the oversight by the Immigration Department. There's the oversight by the board. And the Act makes it pellucidly clear the conditions under which you can cancel work permits. You can cancel it in the public interest. So if you're hurting the environment, you can cancel it. If we come to find that you're not a fit and proper person or something else, we can cancel it. In the interest of national security, we can cancel it. So it's not that this is hard and locked fast that we cannot do. And as I said earlier, under the Financial Transaction Reporting Act, there are so many things that we can consider to ensure that they're not corruption, for anti-corruption, for cybercrime, for money laundering, all of those things. And so as I speak, I want people to envision, and I want the international community, as they see us, to envision what they would desire. I want the people from the IDB, so they will no longer in the Bahamas say, listen, we have contractors who took our monies and messed it up. And what is the consequences for that? That is the environment in which we live. The environment in which we live, and nobody has yet get up to contradict it. When our neighbors to the north said millions of dollars in corrupt contracts. Who's going to come to that and bring their hard-earned money? Hard-earned money. Oh my goodness. Let me say this, Mr. Speaker. We must always, Mr. Speaker, in this honorable place, in this honorable, Mr. Speaker, in this honorable place, in this, Mr. Speaker.
I don't know when to run.
Huh? Mr. Speaker, all I'm going to say,
I'm going to behave yourself in this place.
Mr. Speaker, let's keep our minds out of the gutter. As I said when I spoke to the honorable ladies, style and class rules the day.
In the spirit.
So when persons bring their hard-earned money, I know that when some people see me, certain things go through their mind. But when they bring their hard-earned money, Mr. Speaker, I am my leader, through his ministers and MPs and his supporters, is showing you what is being crafted. Don't allow anybody to distort or abuse what you see. And so in the context of the legislation, or a number of pieces of legislation that we have laid, you're seeing the Bahamas that we're creating. A Bahamas where people feel free. And listen, this piece of legislation, or the legislation that we laid, they're informed. They're conventional. We've done our comparative analysis with leaders in the industry. We've done our comparative analysis with our partners in the industry who volunteered their expertise to say, this is how you can have it done. This is how you can audit your society for efficiency and the lack thereof. As I said when I spoke to the lady from Anguilla, how we're working to make the ease of doing business just what it is. It is to allow persons, once you meet the criterion, you can come in. Your work permit is granted within 14 days. That may shock and surprise some people who may hear it, but that's how the world is. So if somebody goes and, if a gentleman approached me the other day and I referred him to Mr. Kwesi Thompson, he had a terrific idea to start a business. And he had an investor who he was courting. And so under this legislation, he could have employed more than 100 Bahamians. The company could come in, he can have a part of it. It creates employment for lawyers. It creates employments for stores, for vendors. It creates entrepreneurial opportunities, taxi drivers. With this, he's able to have something fast-tracked. Persons are now going on the web and they're bang, 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 getting their hotel room, buying their airline tickets. They're buying stocks, trading online. That is the conventional world that we live in. And anybody who says to you it is otherwise is trying to mama guide you or pull something on you. And that is not the intention of our government. And so it speaks to the work permits, the granting of the work permits, the basis under which the work permits and even the certificate can be taken away: public safety, morality, public morality, and national security. And anybody who knows, that's broad. That gives you wide discretion. And that's one of the reasons why it's left like that. Because what can be an issue of national security, as I said, cybercrime, what wasn't that yesterday can be one today. So it allows us. And Mr. Speaker, I will take you now to the schedule, because the Act does not allow direct competition with Bahamians. The Act realizes and codifies the very essence of Bahamianization. And so in the schedule, the list of businesses, and it gives the minister an opportunity to even expand them. And one of the civil society members has asked that they be expanded.
Public consultation.
And that's through public consultation, because they went on the web, they knew when we laid the bill, and they got a copy. And so it speaks to captive insurance. One time he was the leader. Reinsurance, mutual fund administration, arbitration. The arbitration center, I think, was by a lady that I revere and respect, the Honorable Alison Gibson. I think the former Attorney General was pushing the whole concept of an arbitration center. And so here you have an arbitration, and in the context where people are sure that their interest is taken care of. International arbitrage, computer programming, software design and writing, biometrics, maritime trade, nanotechnology, biomedical industries, boutique health facilities. And you know, one time we led this region in medical tourism. These procedures and stuff, we're looking at health, boutique health stuff. This is the way the world is going. You can imagine you can travel to the Bahamas. You can meet the best and the brightest. Not only that, you have legislation that ensure that our people are receiving something. And it's like I said, that like the old distinguished lady said, there was a time in the Bahamas when this was a part of the obligation for granting work permits. But there's a history, you know, I'm not going to condescend to certain things. Well, I'm not saying condescending. But, you know, the AG always arms me. And he gave me some information, but I don't think I have to use it today. And so, data storage and warehousing, aviation approved, and you can go there and you can look at it. Call centers. Sometimes we're doing business and we don't know. People are in St. Lucia. We could have some of those things here in the Bahamas, Barbados. Not only that, something, it didn't blow my mind, because nothing blows my mind anymore. When I went to a conference, they said that call centers, when you call into the U.S., you're actually speaking to persons in the prisons. They're controlling the call centers. And so a part of their training process, as they bring those persons up to standard, of course they will, when you make certain calls, you hear that the call is being monitored to ensure a certain degree of transparency. But can you imagine, just think about it, if you would have a call center, you can have a call, if we bring in a call center, if they can do it in the US, and it can safely be done. There's some persons who have made mistakes in our country. You could probably man a call center. It goes towards some of their obligations. They might have wronged somebody in the spirit of restorative justice. Through that, they can pay the person, not just with a sorry. You see how innovative this technology is? And so call centers, manufacturing or assembly of manufacturers. And so can you imagine on one of the islands, we're now assembling vehicles. When we think about the Bahamas, we're very well placed. Europe, trying to get to Latin America, you stop off. There's the Panama Canal, even coming through to go back. The experts have said to us we're very well placed. We just have to create the environment where people feel certain that we're doing business, transparent business, and honest business. But what I want to underscore about this bill is that this bill represents the dignity of the human person. It does not seek to leave Bahamians behind. It's not mere rhetoric when I say we put Bahamians first. We put them first in this act so the world can see, so that the average Bahamian can see what we are intending to do in the Bahamas. We've put them first when we said, and I list these things to say that you can be in captive insurance. You can be an arbitrator. You will associate with the best and the brightest because we will ensure that. We've put them first because in the process, we've involved civil society and the private sector. And I hear Cat Island, Rumkins, and Salvador. The private sector has sent in their concerns. And if there are any concerns, legitimate concerns, that the other side may have about this bill, just make the suggestion. And if we think that they're fit and proper, we will add them. And so I say that this bill is contemporary. I say that this bill, as I said when I started, it's a key component in the Bahamas that this F&M government that believes in transparency and accountability is laying. And so as we go on for the next few months, you will see us lay and bring the infrastructure in place that will guide and protect not just Bahamians, but our international investors. It will ensure the eradication of corruption, money laundering, or any of those crimes as international crimes that persons are concerned about. And it would allow persons to come to the Bahamas, bring their train the Bahamas, and it can be a symbiotic relationship, not a parasitic one, a symbiotic relationship where the Bahamas takes, where Bahamians are in the forefront by way of the legislation, and where this country can benefit. As I have said on the occasions when I debated bills, whenever you see a bill is laid, go to the website. I've had a reporter call me the other day and he says, you know, Elspeth, I don't see the bill. I spoke to the AG, we have to get them up. If you find that the bills are not there, let's do that. If you want an explanation on a bill, you can call. I don't shy away from appearing. My AG, he's the principal officer, he will come. And we are obligated to do town meetings. And so you see, with the town meeting for Yamakro, one of the things that's near and dear to me, and I've made no secrets about it, is land reform. And why? The reason why we ask, does it go far enough? Because I honestly think, if you have 500 acres and you can prove that it's generation property, the generation should get it. And so this is contemporary, Mr. Speaker. We will speak to it publicly. We will come to your groups and we will talk about it. But we will allow you to take it away and formulate your own opinion. As I said before, I want to thank the members of civil society and the members of the private sector who were vigilant and observant. And they understand that this government is a government of action, not a bag of mouth. And so when you see a bill is laid, we don't just lay it. We want you to be a part of the process. That is called democratic, active governance. You be a part of the process and let us know what your concerns are. But once you see us lay a bill, and we give you reasonable time, once the Prime Minister says the bell has rung, please don't come off with your gloves off saying, give me time. You know what time? It's time to go. And so those are my submissions. As I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, we will deal with the amendments to the bill in the committal stage, and I want to say that Yamakro supports this legislation unreservedly. I thank you.
Is there a second, though? Second. It's been moved and second. He's speaking? Okay. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and honorable members of the House of Assembly. Once again, I would like to say thank you to the people of the constituency of Centerville for this opportunity. I will continue to give God thanks for his goodness and mercies for affording me this opportunity. I also would like to offer apologies for her absence, the Member of Parliament for Michael. She is on duty in Michael, and she wanted me to say that. And so I wanted to offer apologies for her absence. I also want to congratulate the Member of Parliament for Seabreeze on National Women's Week. I also would like to wish the Royals of the Donald Davis Junior High School success in their Thanksgiving Day basketball jamboree scheduled for this weekend. I just want to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, also to acknowledge my aunt, Mitzi Chipman, who sits in the gallery, who continues to support me and even help me with this presentation. I want to say happy birthday to our Council Rep, Joan Evans, and her grandson, Joshua Chipman. At this time, I'd like to say thanks and condolences on behalf of the entertainment families of the Bahamas to the family of the late Ronnie Butler. The Centerville community appreciates, and I appreciate all the parents and families of Centerville who continue to recognize that this journey to economic development and empowerment is not necessarily for the swift, but for those who can and will endure until the end. Mr. Speaker, on May 21st, 1919, my great-grandfather, Howard Chipman, asked the people from the Southern District, which included Grantstown, to vote for him. Part of that area now, Centerville. He asked them to vote for him because he was a progressive candidate who would push for improvement. He would push for education. He would push for lower taxes. 10 days later, the Nassau Guardian would report that he was elected to this honorable House of Assembly for the first time on May 29, 1919. The Nassau Guardian would have quoted him as saying, "I can serve you independently, as I am not tied to any party." He subsequently won by a large majority, as reported in the Nassau Guardian on May 31st, 1919. Though I am an independent thinker, for those of you who may not know, I am, however, tied to a political party. He was then re-elected in 1928 and then again in 1935, according to the Bahamas Blue Books. So for those of you who doubted whether I would beat the former Prime Minister in Centerville, he did not even stand a chance. My political roots was all over Grantstown, now Centerville, before even he was born. So in 1919, my great-grandfather, Mr. Howard N. Chipman, was shown on the jury list as living in West Bay Street. The Tribune showed him as the owner of Tucker's Estate, an exquisite area in the Western District of Nassau, and quite an entrepreneur. He was the founder of the Rainbow Village Township in 1923. He intended with this township to build 50 houses for the less fortunate people who worked for him, and the Rainbow Village Township to be, and I quote, the best place in the Bahamas as far as sanitation was concerned, according to the Tribune. So in 1947, he then asked Paul Adley's father to file an application to rename the Rainbow Village Township Chippingham, which is named Chippingham today. I said all of that, Mr. Speaker, to show that I have a history and a tradition of the empowerment of Bahamians. And maybe I might add a history of independent and creative thinking. So like my great-grandfather, who sat in this very place, advocating for better homes for the less fortunate, better sanitation, better education, and even lower taxation way back then for the Bahamian people, I find myself 198 years later advocating for much of the same. What will it take for civil society to realize how important it is to empower each other in as much as we can to ensure sustainability of ourselves as human beings and of our economy? 198 years, Mr. Speaker, and we are still advocating for better housing. 198 years, and we are still advocating for better sanitation. 198 years, and we are still advocating for better education. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, the system can make you feel helpless. But we must press forward, because we would not want any Bahamian, any child advocating these same things for the next 198 years. Today I rise to speak on a bill, the Commercial Enterprises Bill 2017. This happens to be a bill for an act for the designation of specified commercial enterprises, as well as specified economic zones in the Bahamas. The objectives and reasons of the bill are listed and tabled as a bill to provide for the liberalization of the granting of work permits. The bill provides for the procedures for making an application under the Act to the Bahamas Investment Board. The bill also provides for the requirement of a specified commercial enterprise certificate, and of course to provide for the employees who are granted work permits to meet the criteria of their relevant regulatory authority or professional body. The topic of work permits and enterprises, Mr. Speaker, is never an easy discussion in the Bahamas. I would like to encourage, however, every Bahamian to review the Commercial Enterprise Bill and to take on every opportunity it may afford you. Become an expert in this particular act and continue to believe in your God-given full potential to excel. Much like the Hotel Encouragement Act, as well as the Antiquities, Monuments, and Museum Act, there are many incentives in these acts. We as Bahamians need to familiarize ourselves with our own acts. We have to familiarize ourselves with the opportunities because we are ready to embrace them, and we should. The bill speaks to a specified commercial enterprise. This enterprise, however, has an opportunity to garner significant expertise over a period of time by being given an opportunity to educate, train, and build the capacity necessary to be sustainable. It is the people's time, Mr. Speaker. So I would like to see related policies that would address the makeup and culture of our investment board. It cannot be business as usual. However, the culture cannot be one of what I have said in this house many times, the black crab syndrome, which means it may be good for Peter but not good for Paul. The black crab syndrome is not economically progressive, nor is it sustainable for us moving forward. Ridding ourselves of that minor syndrome is actually the first step in realizing our hopes and in fact capitalizing on our dreams. Like my great-grandfather, I believe in the strength and empowerment of the Bahamian people, no matter their skin color. I believe in their creativity and in their ingenuity. I believe in what we have to offer. But I do understand that our economic value does not necessarily match our commercial enterprise potential. Like many who needed my great-grandfather's assistance to start their own businesses and to find adequate housing, we find ourselves in that position today. A nation that needs foreign investment, international expertise, global knowledge to facilitate our already damaged economy. But at what cost? 198 years later, and we have not struck the right balance between immigration, enterprise, and our socio-economic deficiencies. This has now moved away, for me, from a matter of legislation to a matter of policy and the enforcement of those policies. Because after 198 years, you cannot tell me that there's nothing on the books that provide for a greater protection of our Bahamian economy. I am sure there must be. Specified commercial enterprises must be the vehicle for the establishment of our wealth potential in this country. We must use these vehicles to attract new business. We must use these vehicles to become specialists, global specialists. We must use these vehicles to establish global niche markets and to learn all we can about the potential of enterprise. We must use SCEs to build sustainable international relationships. We must use these vehicles to make the right connection. So we don't need an investment board that will not keep the business plans confidential, or will pass a business plan on to a friend or a family member or even a politician. These are the things that should be made criminal in order to protect that which is Bahamian, or to protect any enterprise for that matter. When I benchmark similar acts, this is the only one or one of that even spoke to capacity building. See, you cannot build capacity without quality assurance programs and processes. The problem for the 198 years is that there is no effective and efficient follow-up and policy monitoring in government. The discipline of capacity building, which leads to economic sustainability and, of course, business continuity, seems non-existent in our business culture. We seem to create laws and then forget that they were passed, unless, of course, we needed it to get the next international loan facility. The facilitation unit and the SCE certificate in this bill would no doubt assist with national capacity building as envisioned by the bill. However, policy and the enforcement thereof must drive the potential of this bill and the potential of the Bahamian professional. The question becomes, Mr. Speaker and honorable members, how prepared are we to preserve, protect, and promote that which is Bahamian? I can say, Mr. Speaker, I am. And if any of us in here cannot say, I am, then we have another 198 years to go. At least, however, this becomes the starting point. The first schedule of the bill speaks to the types of businesses as it relates to what types may qualify as an SCE. It speaks to captive insurance, reinsurance, mutual fund administration, arbitration, wealth management, international trade, and international arbitrage. Most of these areas are specialty areas and will require identified foreigners to assist. Over the many years, I would have facilitated the licensing of many in the above fields. Yet the areas are so specialized, not only in terms of business development, but also in terms of risk and technical expertise, that those businesses can lose millions in a day with just one wrong press of a button. So we understand a balance must be struck. But what we do not understand is when unqualified individuals with no book of business or minimum expertise or qualification waltz their way through the immigration lines or transfer from one company to another with no checks and balances. Well, I believe there needs to be established policies to ensure there are background checks, not only on anti-money laundering factors, but the expertise and the business development factors that accommodate such requests. In many cases in the area of financial services, persons are given work permits without required expertise, and in some cases they have to be trained even by Bahamians. This has become a sore issue, Mr. Speaker, in our industry. But over the years, in my capacity as a financial trainer, I've tried to get others to understand the importance of these interrelationships. However, they should not be to the detriment of a growing, educated, and a more dynamic Bahamian professional. We have, however, seen improvements in this area. This is a good opportunity for the country to embrace commercial enterprise or commercial enterprise-driven immigration policies that are actually effective and monitored. This is a good opportunity to strike the right balance. The right balance is simple. Follow the law. The establishment of the commercial enterprise bill should allow for better collection of immigration data, capacity building analysis, as well as the measurement of our human capital, both local and international. It should also allow for a more compliant immigration and work permit application process that should also be easily measured and measured to economic results. The first schedule also speaks to the business of technology and aviation. I would have liked to have seen the business of entertainment there. I'm biased when it comes down to entertainment and entertainers. You know, that's from whence I came. And I'm now discovering that I've also come from some political lineage as well, which works together, hopefully, for the betterment of entertainers in our country. Mr. Speaker, Centerville notes clearly that this act provides for the establishment of a specified commercial enterprise zone. I would have indicated earlier that my great-grandfather, 198 years ago, would have advocated for low taxation in the area of Grantstown, part of which is now Centerville. 190 years later, maybe the Rainbow Village Township could register to become a commercial enterprise zone. Centerville, Mr. Speaker, and honorable members, look forward to any incentives or benefits as a result of this designation, so that we may end this streak of over 198 years of advocacy for better housing, better sanitation, better education, and lower taxes. So, Mr. Speaker and honorable members, I do second and support the bill. However, Centerville will closely monitor its progress and management thereof. Thank you.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act for the designation of specified commercial enterprises and specified commercial economic zones in the Bahamas. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed. As many as are in favor? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, I always like to thank God and the good people of Exuma, Exuma Keys, and Ragged Island for sending me here to speak on their behalf. I salute and support the Progressive Women's Initiative today, and I salute the strength of women in the Bahamas who have rocked the cradles of our country from time. Mr. Speaker, I stand to contribute to the Commercial Enterprises Bill 2017. Let me say at the outset that if the general theme is to support and grow industry, to support and grow financial services, I support the general spirit. Mr. Speaker, I am familiar with Enterprise City in Cayman, and to the extent that this is an attempt to compete with that, I see where we are going. Although I have very serious reservations about some clauses of the actual bill. Regrettably, as it stands, I cannot and will not support the bill in its current form. I would, however, be happy to reconsider should suitable amendments be considered and made. As you know, Mr. Speaker, I am pro-business, and when I came to this House, I said I would not oppose things simply for opposing's sake. And I've also said that I want this administration to succeed. And though I said that before I became Deputy Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, I stand by what I said. Because I believe if we make and take a bipartisan approach to many things, we could get much done to contribute towards the greater good of the Bahamas. There should therefore be a bipartisan approach to financial services in particular. And I am happy to see captives and reinsurance on the radar of this government, although there is more considerations to be had. We have lost a lot of ground in the financial services industry, and for a variety of factors. So there shouldn't be any room for politics in financial services. So I would like the members to keep that in mind as I speak. Mr. Speaker, financial services is a confidence business. It's a dynamic industry that requires constant innovation. Accepting an opportunity to invest in the Bahamas likewise versus somewhere else is also a question of confidence in the Bahamas and its competitiveness. However, Mr. Speaker, upon reading this bill, it appears to target niche industries the Bahamas is not known for, which is by no means a bad thing, were it not coupled with the immigration elements that's built into the bill. Sectors such as international arbitrage, computer programming, software design, bioinformatics, maritime trade, nanotechnology. Is there a place for Bahamians to get more deeply involved in these industries? And what are we doing now that we've identified these industries to encourage more Bahamians to participate in them? What are we doing in terms of providing more scholarships for these industries or encouraging Bahamians to participate more actively now that we've identified that they are underserved? Mr. Speaker, I do not have a xenophobic bone in my body, but we should always seek to level the playing field for Bahamians. I invite this government, therefore, to look again, take a very close look again at Schedule 1. There is a lot of devil in the detail. With respect to immigration, Mr. Speaker, this bill seems to marry immigration and investment policy in a way that perhaps might be done more effectively through just changing the overall immigration policy and better monitoring the immigration department in line with the policy objectives. The length of time it takes to process work permits has always been a sore point in the business community. And I spoke out often on the issue when I was in another chair as chairman of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, let me say that on the idea of work permits being deemed to have been issued, if not responded to, is of concern. Whilst I get the attempt to make the system less lethargic, we must vigorously protect our borders. It would be best practice, in my view, to do due diligence up front, not on the back end. This, I believe, as we all would agree, is a dangerous world where terrorism, terrorist financing, money laundering, and criminality is rampant. I am concerned, therefore, that this is a potential loophole for abuse and potential reputational risk for our fine country. As I said, Mr. Speaker, there should be no politics in regard to financial services, but there are clearly some political implications here in this bill. And whilst the leader of the opposition attempted to warn the other side with respect to some of the philosophical aspects, I know he will return to the point. I therefore will skip a significant section discussing that particular issue. But it's a hard sell to Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, when we say it's their time, and then you're making it easier for foreigners to open companies and get work permits without identifying and explaining the upside and the benefits in detail to the Bahamian people. On my part, Mr. Speaker, I don't think the intention was anything sinister. Misguided, perhaps. But thankfully, I am not the one to sell this. Mr. Speaker, though the plan appears to be to spur economic activity by relaxing immigration policy alone, in my view, will not do it. It just won't happen in the absence of efficiencies in other approval processes and promotions abroad. I believe with respect to promotions, this is where I'm sure the Bahamas Financial Services Board can assist the government, and I trust that they would have been fully consulted on this particular bill. On the question of promotions abroad, where I believe the rubber will meet the road, I have long held the view that there should be active promotion desks of the Bahamas Investment Authority in all of our foreign services offices. And I trust that the government will consider this suggestion, as in this competitive world, we simply cannot be business as usual. Mr. Speaker, this bill also appears to create more bureaucracy in the creation of a new unit within the Bahamas Investment Board that could potentially give the unit more authority than is now vested in the National Economic Council or the Cabinet itself. Mr. Speaker, creating more bureaucracy won't do it. We already have the Bahamas Investment Authority. Before we create additional entities, we should take stock of those that already exist. Is this an admission, perhaps, that the BIA is not functioning optimally? And that's a question that begs to be answered in the light of this bill. And while we're on the issue of the BIA, I asked the minister responsible again if he would please give us an update on what is the status of projects foreign direct investments in the pipeline that's been approved by the BIA and the Cabinet. Exuma in particular wants to know. So in my view, the rule about the automatic issuance of work permits in line with this legislation is not the solution. If the government wants to better accommodate foreign employees of companies in the Bahamas, then change the policy to better facilitate it for everyone, and the efficiency of implementing it for domestic companies too. Will we create a class where there's absolute response in 14 days whilst the domestic company languish for months and months, having to make follow-up after follow-up? What should we be doing is making improvement across the public service, not creating a policy for a select group to avoid the inefficiency that plagues the entire system. We should make it a policy to improve efficiency rather than creating a default for inefficiency. Efficiency is not a question of legislation. It is a question of management. Let me repeat that. Efficiency is not a question of legislation. It is a question of management. What we should be doing is creating policy that sets basic standards throughout the public sector, like requiring all government agencies to respond to letters and emails within 24 to 48 hours. And by the way, if the public service is overstaffed, then we should consider an opportunity to redeploy some of them to dramatically improve efficiencies in places like the Department of Immigration.
Amen.
I want members opposite to revisit my earlier comments where I say I am forward looking. There is no room here for politics. We must embrace this opportunity to improve our country moving forward. We must improve moving forward. What we should be doing, Mr. Speaker, is ensuring that that poor businessman who showed me an email dated July 2nd, who wrote to a minister, a member from the other side, on a matter of mutual interest, July 2nd, 2017. He received the reply from the minister's office a few days ago, on November 16th, perhaps 4.5 or 5 months later, and the email read, "Dear sir, reference, no, Mr. Speaker, this is pretty benign. This is the point, in fact, very benign. Reference is made to your email of July 2nd on the above captioned subject. I am directed to advise that the minister has acknowledged the email." Very benign. Said nothing. 4.5 months wait. These are the kinds of inefficiencies that we must fix. What we should be doing is mandating that the Department of Immigration respond to all work permits within 14 days instead of default approvals. Mr. Speaker, while this legislation is perhaps a welcome step in innovative thinking, and I hope Sinans is listening now, whilst this legislation is perhaps a welcome step in innovative thinking, I think we can build a better bill. We can build a better bill. For instance, the threshold for business to qualify for commercial enterprise certificate, which allows them to have foreign employees start work without a work permit and gives the business 30 days to apply for one, and then forces the immigration director to respond within 14 days, perhaps should be higher than $250,000. Mr. Speaker, I invite the side opposite to look at an amendment on this point and consider whether a more appropriate level might be in the $1 million range. I submit that a business formed with $250,000 is not a large business. It's a small business, in fact, and should not be entitled to any relaxation of immigration policy. I doubt that it will create many jobs for foreigners. It certainly will not create many jobs, if any, for Bahamians, who can perhaps apprentice in some of these niche industries. I also note, Mr. Speaker, that I also note that there is no requirement in this legislation to hire a single Bahamian, as is the case in Enterprise City in Cayman. And I'm not suggesting that they have the perfect model either. With more investment and work, with more investment and work with the venture capital fund, we could probably find Bahamians who could participate more actively in some of these industries and allow them to compete not just in the Bahamas but also on a global level. I therefore call on the government to do something positively dramatic, like redirecting up to $10 million per annum to the venture fund to support small business creation in the Bahamas. And maybe there could be more participation in these unique industries as well. This would also perhaps encourage Bahamians with expertise. This would also perhaps encourage Bahamians with expertise to return home, which is a stated objective of the speech from the throne. It would also work well with the F&M's narratives about creating more entrepreneurs and encouraging Bahamians to return home, a point I endorse with my friend from North Abaco. I got to tell you, I have real trouble understanding the rationale for the 250,000, but I am willing to hear a convincing argument. Is it that this administration is seeking to cast as wide a net as possible to attract business here and increase license and VAT revenues? Because this is clearly not a job creation or entrepreneurship mechanism for Bahamians. It is the government's obligation to articulate the philosophy of this particular piece of legislation, and therefore I raise what I consider to be well thought out and considered questions, and hopefully, Mr. Speaker, in a mature dialogue, some of the answers to these questions will in fact be forthcoming. And hopefully, Mr. Speaker, some of the points may in fact be considered as potential investment amendments to this bill. Mr. Speaker, I wonder whether there has been any analysis that they would share to suggest that this 250 is in fact the optimal level, and I would be much obliged to listen. But in the absence of such information provided by members of this administration, I would again suggest that the 1 million threshold ought to be considered. This will attract bigger players from the international market, who will hire more Bahamians, who will transfer knowledge, and who will create more capacity in the Bahamian industries. Further, if this is about encouraging financial services, then perhaps a higher threshold would better achieve this objective. Mr. Speaker, this administration recently announced its intention to raise the threshold for permanent residency on investment basis from 500,000 to 750,000, and fast tracking of those applications of investments over 1.5 million. So I am looking to reconcile the difference between the 250,000 threshold in this particular bill with the expressed intention in other similar perspectives. I fail to see why the threshold for foreigners opening a business in the Bahamas and getting relaxed immigration rules should be so much less than a foreigner actually investing in property here or operating a more substantial business. Again, my recommendation for a threshold in Clause 4 would be in the $1 million range in the absence of a compelling argument for the lower amount. Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate that I don't want to be political here, but that this is one of the top priorities of this administration, thus ultimately raise some concerns. This, as one of the top priorities of this administration, does ultimately raise some concern. I am a bit confused, Mr. Speaker, about it. Why are we running to roll out the red carpet for foreign small businesses and not doing diddly to help Bahamian businesses
Honorable
that are today
Honorable-
clinging to their life as it stands?
The chair recognizes Honorable Member for Carmichael.
Has and continues to mislead this honorable place. This bill, paragraph 3, says the act applies to any person. Doesn't apply to foreigners, as he keeps referring to. It applies to Bahamians, it applies to anybody. And the honorable member continues to refer to foreigners. And so he's... Speaker, it is important for us to appreciate that the bill refers to Bahamians as well as anyone else, not simply foreigners, as the honorable member said.
Mr. Speaker, I have high regard for Michael, and I appreciate any opportunity that he seeks to give me guidance, given his senior status in this House. But I believe he has misunderstood me. And I believe there are some elements of this bill that he, I hope, will address when he speaks. Because this is a bill that's talking about the granting of work permits. I can add as well if you wish. I'm speaking to the bigger picture here now. I'm not being myopic about this, and I hope you would consider all of my comments in the full extent that I have given them. Bahamians don't need work permits. So I'm making the point, Mr. Speaker, in the wider extent of what we are discussing here. And I know there was some amendment laid today, something about a joint venture or something that may not have been included in the first aspect. I didn't have a chance to look at it, Mr. Speaker, because it was only laid today, brought to my attention today. So if the amendment addresses this point, and I know my colleagues will speak to it, if it addresses it, fine. But based on my observations, Mr. Speaker, I speak to the issues as laid out in the bill that is presented. Now let me continue if I may. Let me make a very important point, and I noticed, Mr. Speaker, that my time didn't stop with respect to I'm happy to be so informed then, Mr. Speaker, because I do have a few more very, very important points to make. Mr. Speaker, why are we rolling out the red carpet to attract businesses from abroad? Small businesses investing $250,000 when, at a minimum of $250,000, when we need reforms for small business domestically in the Bahamas, and small business people been crying and crying and crying, Mr. Speaker, for more reforms that make it easier to start a business and to do business in the Bahamas. This is the point that I am making. We need to reform the business license tax with dispatch. And for the love of countries, Grand Bahama, we need to reform and refine the speed that it takes to get a business license in the Bahamas. This is I'm talking about domestic businesses, man. I'm talking about businesses that exist, that want to exist and start up in Exuma and Ragged Island and Angliston, Mr. Speaker. This, Mr. Speaker, when we talk about the process, and I invite you, if you haven't experienced it, to apply for business license to do a small business in the Bahamas. It is an atrociously unbelievable headache, Mr. Speaker. And this is very low hanging fruit. Stuff that would be easy to do. And we could do this today, Mr. Speaker. If they brought these regulations tomorrow, I will vote for them today. Because Bahamian entrepreneurs across the length and breadth of the Bahamas is seeking progress from this government, seeking relief from this government. Mr. Speaker, it was them who said that it's now the people's time. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of business license, I speak on behalf of many Bahamians who find it on the front that Bahamian businesses are seemingly not priority in terms of relief, while government scrambles to bring this legislation. It baffles my mind, Mr. Speaker, why hurdles, I'm certain unintentional hurdles, are seemingly placed in the way of domestic small business. Unintentionally, I say, again, this is a political point. We must improve the ease of doing business for small and medium-sized enterprises in the Bahamas, and I dare one opposite to dispute the need for more ease of business. And I know my friend from East Grand Bahama will talk about this because we're on the same page on this one. Agreed. Mr. Speaker, I understand that we need to increase our attractiveness as a global financial services center. Let me repeat this, Mr. Speaker. This needs to be heard. I understand that we need to increase our attractiveness as a global investment and financial services center.
Yes, agreed.
I mentioned earlier the Cayman Special Economic Zones, which this is perhaps trying to emulate. And in looking closely at that and their entire system, they are so far ahead of us. We must move post-haste with singular focus in terms of improving our competitiveness. And I became even more concerned with regard to how far we are behind on this when I read the bill. For example, when we look at the first schedule, on it are competitive on captive and reinsurance and mutual fund administration. I welcome the discussion on captives and reinsurance. I am concerned a bit with respect to mutual fund administration because I am fully aware that there's great capacity and expertise amongst our professionals with this particular business. There could perhaps be more with respect to hedge funds and derivatives, but with respect to vanilla mutual fund administration, I believe we ought to look at this point in Schedule 1. I also question, Mr. Speaker, how this will work with local regulators, like the insurance and securities regulators, where they still require licensing, and I hope that someone will speak to that as we move along. Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, as my time winds down, perhaps we need to look at Schedule 1 a bit more closely. I think maybe there's opportunity to look at robotics, biomimicry, and we must also look to see what we're doing in ship registry in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure whether this is the mechanism for it, but I can tell you, Cayman Islands, again, eating our proverbial lunch with respect to ship registry and the efficiency or inefficiency of that process. Mr. Speaker, I support creative ways to become more innovative and competitive. What I don't support is increased bureaucracy. I question the need for a new unit to administer this bill. It appears that the Ministry of Financial Services, Trade and Industry is creating a carve-out to suit its purpose, perhaps at the expense of not improving the existing machinery. Can this not be administered by a functioning BIA, NEC, and Department of Immigration? Is there a suggestion that these units are dysfunctional? If so, shouldn't we be addressing the dysfunctions rather than creating more dysfunctional bureaucracies? Is it an issue of them not meeting regularly? Is it a management issue rather than a structural issue? Is it an issue of speed, transparency, and efficiency? If we want speed and to speed up the process of work permits, for example, can we simply do it by improving efficiencies in the process? And maybe can we implement an immigration policy that creates a desk in the Department of Immigration that perhaps look at some of these specialist areas? In summary, Mr. Speaker, I really question the need for the new unit. Overall, Mr. Speaker, I seriously question whether this bill, in its current form, as well-intentioned as it may have been, will result in dramatic inefficiencies, and I encourage that there be a dramatic and radical improvement in the ease of doing business, not just in the Department of Immigration, but across the entire public service. And we have some good people in the public service, Mr. Speaker, and many times there is the tendency to berate them. But today, I want to salute all of the high-achieving, high-performing public servants that give to this country every day. Mr. Speaker, I trust that my contributions to this debate was helpful. I trust that it will be received in the spirit that it was given. I trust that many of my recommendations will be considered. I trust that the side opposite will see the benefits in withdrawing this bill to allow them more time to consider some of the points raised. But in its current form, Mr. Speaker, I cannot in good conscience support it. On behalf of the industrious people of Exuma, Exuma Keys, and Ragged Island, I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of order?
Honourable member for East Grand Bahama. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Centerville who wants to make an amendment to his.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to make a correction, and I owe this correction to, of course, my accounting colleagues. It was not 198 years ago, but 98 years ago. So we had some, and also to my friends who may have gone out and played 198, and then and 098 fell. So, so just to make sure the correction was done here in the House, it was 98 years ago, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a very important intervention. Mr. Speaker, before I begin, just want to express condolences on behalf of my family and constituency, and certainly the people of Grand Bahama as a whole, to the family of the late Carver Grant, who is the uncle of the member for Yamakura, and a distinguished Bahamian civil engineer, one who has contributed to this country tremendously, not only in Grand Bahama, but throughout the Bahamas. A proud son of West End Grand Bahama, and certainly one who, as a personal friend of mine, certainly I've had a lot of respect for a quiet gentleman, very, very respectful and considered and measured gentleman, and certainly one that the community of Grand Bahama will certainly miss. I know that he and I are both members of the Rotary Club of Lucaya, where he was a fixture, and in his quiet way, a very witty and wise man. And certainly I know that the Rotary Club will certainly miss his presence and the levity and the spirit and character that he brought to our club. And the same way with respect to his lodge affiliation, again, someone who was revered and respected in all circles of Grand Bahama. And so I certainly want to pay my respect to his wife, Veronica, his children, and to the extended family on the loss of someone we certainly have a lot of love and respect for, and he will be missed. I also would like to, in the same vein, express my condolences to the family of the late Ronnie Butler, a cultural icon in this country, and one, you know, that I don't think that we as a country did justice to. As a pioneer, as a man who has represented this country locally and internationally with grace and with style and flair, never really got his roses, as I would say. Certainly not from the public sector. I think the private sector did some things for him, but certainly in the public sector, we did not give him the kind of, and as we do with most entertainers, we tend to just enjoy their music, but we kind of discard their contribution to the life of our country and to the soul of us as a people, and that's unfortunate. And I hope that we can do something about that as we go forward. But certainly, I want to recognize and mark his passing, and to share in the sentiments of the community with respect to recognizing his legend. I also would like to express condolences on the passing of the late Leviticus Kemp in High Rock, a very old but quiet man who was just a fixture. His wife predeceased him, another character, but lovely people, salt of the earth people, and certainly we remember and express our condolences to the family. On a more happy note, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the winners of the Volleyball National Championships that was held in Freeport, Grand Bahama this past weekend. On the men's side, the C.I. Gibson Rattlers won, and certainly in a very exciting and powerful game. It's amazing how fast that ball moves, Mr. Speaker, and those young men are able to handle it. I believe that if we can continue to pour into that sport, it can do equally as well for us as a country as basketball or even track. They are that good, Mr. Speaker. And I want to particularly pay congratulatory sentiments to the ladies winner from Agape Christian School in Abaco, who was an underdog. But those ladies played their hearts out, and again, the level of skill that was on display, I believe, I want to say when we're picking these national teams, that we make sure that we look at the Family Islands. Because the talent, again, that was displayed by that team out of Abaco is second to none. Abaco sound very good. I'm very proud of them. They did a fantastic job. I mean, fantastic job representing themselves. As did the yeah, exactly. as did the team, the second place team, and they all did very well. And I'm very proud of all of them. I just want to congratulate them and encourage them to continue to practice and to work hard, because I believe that there's room in this sporting fraternity for talents like that. And I am sure that the minister will work to ensure that it is exposed and that it's included in those national teams as we go forward. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the wonderful people of East Grand Bahama who have sent me to this place and who have experienced and exercised the most patience as they and Grand Bahama as a whole continue to wait for the promised turnaround of the country and of our economy and job creation following the last 5 years of recession. And yes, make no mistake about it, the country itself has been in a bit of recession, but Grand Bahama has been even more so in a state of recession, and the evidence of it is clearly and painfully obvious to all of us who live there, as well as those who reside there. And, you know, I do want to commend the Prime Minister for taking the level of interest that he has in Grand Bahama, because, again, as with most family islands, we tend to feel neglected from time to time, and our issues don't necessarily always make it to the top of the agenda. But certainly, with the participation of the Prime Minister in the office of the Prime Minister in Grand Bahama and in the affairs of the island, we are seeing the benefits, and I am sure that we are going to see the results in very short order. Mr. Speaker, Grand Bahama has indeed been a special place, full of opportunity, yet it has lacked the sustained success, and one may ask why. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the answer to that puzzle is complex and indeed requires a great deal of introspection and deliberation, deliberate action on behalf of actors involved, who have from time to time worked in good faith, but in other times have been obstructionists to the true vision of the island of Grand Bahama and Freeport in particular. Mr. Speaker, the government will shortly bring a bill to address the situation in Grand Bahama. And even as we work on completing several initiatives, we believe this initiative will bring some relief to our constituents. Yes. The Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister must be commended for his creative vision for our island and the leadership in facilitating planned investments. The recent tech fair, for instance, was a tremendous success, I understand. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there myself. But from the level of conversation and the stimulus of intellectual minds with respect to the possibilities, in and of itself, I believe, is a tremendous win for the minister and for the office of the Prime Minister in Grand Bahama. Because for the first time, I believe that individuals in the tech field feel that they have a place to express their creativity and their vision, and they know that it will fall on receptive ears from a government that will do all it can to facilitate their investment. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the job of bringing Grand Bahama around is no easy job, considering all of the emergency needs of the citizens of our island, the distress caused by job losses and hurricane damage. Mr. Speaker, we continue to promote Grand Bahama. I have a number of groups just this past weekend there was a group, and we continue to have people come to Grand Bahama to see the island and to explore the opportunities that exist there. And I have no doubt that we are going to be able to bring about the restoration that we spoke about over the last few years that was unfortunately neglected in the past. Mr. Speaker, today, however, we are talking about one of the government's initiatives to help spur both domestic and international investments throughout the country, that being this Commercial Enterprise Bill 2017. Mr. Speaker, this bill is really designed to help facilitate the ease of doing business in general, but more specifically, to make the Bahamas really attractive to a niche, high-value business that we have decided that we wanted to tackle, to target, as outlined in Schedule 1 of the bill. Mr. Speaker, these business sectors that have been outlined are either non-existent in the Bahamas or they are underrepresented in the Bahamas. And so the targeted list of specified commercial enterprises represent a core set of industries and sectors which have been identified as ones that are available for exploitation, that the Bahamas and Bahamians can excel at, and where specific knowledge transfer can occur, leading to high-paying jobs and a growing and diverse business sector that results in new spin-off businesses for Bahamians directly. Mr. Speaker, I listened and I hear the concerns about immigration and what that may mean in terms of the relaxing or the attempts to drive efficiency in the whole process. I want to remind members and the public that it wasn't too long ago that the entire financial services sector was dominated by foreign nationals, by work permit holders.
Medical field too.
Medical field, certainly accounting, engineers, all of them. Dominated.
I mean, this thing started 50 years ago.
By foreigners. But it was.
Okay, well, that's what we were talking about at the beginning.
But it was the
40 years later, it's mostly Bahamians.
The work permits that were issued at the time allowed for the facilitation of this industry, this financial services industry. Had it not been for the vision of the then government to allow for these individuals to come, to establish these industries, and allow Bahamians to be trained and to organically grow into the industry, we would be having a totally different conversation today. And that's why I think it's so curious from the side opposite. Who would have been largely responsible that they would sit here today
Muzzle.
and try to stop progress? Mr. Speaker,
Success of the Bahamas.
there's two types of immigration. There's migration, which is what concerns most Bahamians. The illegal flow of refugees or economic migrants. That is what concerns most Bahamians.
Yes.
And that is a problem. And we need to address it. My friend is not here, but to use the word, from a holistic approach. We need to address that. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about immigration as a development tool. We're talking about bringing in or facilitating skilled talent to this country to help us develop identified opportunities that have not been taken advantage of for whatever reason, whether for lack of talent or lack of initiative. We have decided that there are target industries that will facilitate and supplement our industries here in this country, particularly in the financial services side. And so when we talk about the mutual funds industry, for instance, as the member for Exuma spoke about, that Bahamians are involved in, I agree with him. In the general, plain vanilla mutual fund or trust fund administration, we have Bahamians that can do that. But what we do not have is those experts that are on the cutting edge of new tax compliant structures. We all know the story about mutual and how we lost it.
What was the story of Captain Insurance?
Immigration.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
We lost it because of our immigration policies to a large extent. And so what we are trying to do here is to modernize our investment structure so that our jurisdiction once again becomes attractive to investment, and that we give ourselves an opportunity to take advantage of growing sectors and futuristic business opportunities. So this is not a foreign investment or foreign focused bill. This is a bill focused on growing our economy. This is about giving us an opportunity to be in the game. You see, one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that when it comes to the ease of doing business and the World Bank's rankings and all of these things, it isn't that the Bahamas is doing anything wrong, per se.
Not doing enough right.
But the problem is the rest of the world is adapting and changing and moving forward.
Quicker than we are.
While we sit here holding on to our cheese, saying, why do we have to change? Why do we have to be flexible? Why do we have to open our economy? Well, the reality is, while we're sitting here protecting what we think is something big, the rest of the world is moving and becoming more attractive. I was just in Jamaica. They are doing a tremendous job in Jamaica, believe it or not. And if we don't watch ourselves, if they can get their crime situation under control, we'll be in trouble. We have to modernize our system. We have to be more business friendly. And we do have to be, or encourage, more flexible policies and to improve our ease of doing business. So, Mr. Speaker, see, Exuma and I don't disagree. And I listen to him. He has to make his points, but he's a chamberman, so he understands that the more businesses we can attract to this economy, the more economic activity we can have occur in this economy, then the more opportunity there is for all of us. In this case, the rising tide does lift all boats. You see, Mr. Speaker, again, what we're talking about here is niche opportunities that do not exist or that are underserved. And so I listened as the member spoke about the threshold, the investment threshold, being $250,000 and how that might be too low. And I understand where he's coming from, but here's the rationale. He's a chamberman, so he understands this. In most economies, small businesses drive the majority of the economic activity.
Yep. Yep. He knows it.
What we are trying to do is to encourage, again, these niche investors, both Bahamians and foreigners, to invest in the Bahamas, even if it is a sole proprietor. Because you know what? If you have somebody come to invest in, say, a software development company, well, guess what? He has no need to build $1 million building. He has no need to hire 50, 100 people. But what he does have a need for is modest accommodation, house, apartment rent, whatever. He's going to participate in civic society. He's going to patronize restaurants and bars and whatever. He's going to buy a car. He's going to use services, et cetera, et cetera. And the business itself is going to generate taxes. So there's a lot of spin-off for Bahamians, and this is where you got to look at it. And so the question is, do we be the dog in the manger and say we've got this place, the Bahamas, that is so desirable in our own minds that we're going to exclude these startup businesses And these would-be entrepreneurs that may be interested in operating from our environment for whatever reason, whether it's a tax reason or whether it's a location reason or the infrastructure that we have from a telecommunications point of view, or electrical point of view, whatever. Whether we're going to bar them and that potential from coming to this country because we're waiting to land the big whale. Well, as we all know, the big whale comes very infrequently. And when he comes with a whole host of demands and issues. And we see it right out west.
The yellowtail always.
We see it. This approach that we're taking today says, listen, yes, we want the big whales, but we are not going to hold back the growth of our economy. Dog in the manger, or bone in the mouth looking in the water, talking about what we have, while our economy continues to be stagnated or recessed. We're going to give ourselves an opportunity.
Yes.
So we're saying, for these businesses that, in the main, do not operate in the local economy or do not compete with Bahamians, we want you to come. We want you to set up. We want you to work in the knowledge economy. We want you to create in the Bahamas. And you know what? We don't know which of these $250,000 investments is going to be the one. It's going to be the next Facebook. It's going to be the next Google or the next Microsoft. We don't know. We know that the U.S. policy right now today is unattractive to some engineers and software developers. So why are we not interested? Why should we not go out and attract that kind of talent to our country? They're not on social services. They're not coming here to live off the fat of our land. They're coming to contribute and to add to the fabric of our country. And so, Mr. Speaker,
And you all did this
this
in 2015.
is, in my view, a visionary piece of legislation because it recognizes that we have an opportunity to create a small, medium-sized enterprise class of entrepreneurs with high intellectual capital over and above the fiscal contributions that they will make. And from their presence, Bahamians will in fact benefit. Now, Mr. Speaker, you know, it's interesting, too. Sorry, I'm going to finish. Yeah, I'm going to. Two, as they talk about this $1 million thing, and the other side of their mouth comes this thing about the price of land and how land is unavailable to Bahamians. But what do you think happens when you have $1 million investment? That's somebody going out and buying land, driving up the price. Right? What we're talking about is people who will come and live among us, $250,000, and contribute, Mr. Speaker, in developing new industries that do not exist, Mr. Speaker. And they do not have, most of these people do not have heavy capital requirements because these are intellectual property type companies. Look at what we're talking about. You know, nanotechnology. We're talking about captive insurance. We're going to rent, you know, office space and all the rest of it. We're talking about call centers. We're talking about international arbitration, which is a big deal, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about wealth management. We're talking about reinsurance, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about maritime developments. You know, we're talking about aviation management.
They could be in Andros.
Right? They can be anywhere in the country. And that's the other part of the beauty of this bill, because it gives the minister the opportunity to develop, to designate economic zones throughout this country. And so, Grand Bahama, Freeport, I want to say to the promoters of Grand Bahama, it ain't long now before the advantages that we have are going to be diluted. So get off the dime and do what you have to do today.
But we're giving opportunities for Exuma, for Eleuthera, for Andros, for Long Island, for Gad Island, to develop their own economic zones.
Yep.
Right? So, Mr. Speaker, this bill, I believe, is really has the opportunity to be something really, really transformational, fantastic in terms of developing an entrepreneurial class in this country that spreads the risk of job losses and industry fluctuations. It gives us an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to create employment across a class of industries, diversify our economy, to create knowledge and export knowledge from this destination, Mr. Speaker. You cannot stand here, as the minister, as the member for Exuma said, and do the same things that you've always done and expect that you're going to get something else. You cannot sit here with an immigration policy that has been retarded for years and think that you're going to encourage investment in this country. Mr. Speaker, you can close. Mr. Speaker, we can do better. We can do better. And one of the things, and I just want to encourage the side opposite. Please stop dumbing down to people in this country. Stop playing to the greatest fears, the fears of this country. Again, the fears of Bahamians is not about positive immigration. It is about migration.
Release the potential.
And we must not confuse the two, because we to do so to the detriment of our own country and the development of our country. We need economic growth. We've got to figure out how we're going to stimulate and cause that to happen. And it is not going to happen by having regressive immigration policy or investment policies. We have to open up the economy. We have to invite people to participate. We have to encourage Bahamians to invest. And I don't just want to speak to this thing about the ease of doing business and the fact that or the suggestion that we're not doing anything for Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, one of the first things he did was to commission an ease of doing business committee, which is made up of a cross-section of Bahamians. And the member for Exuma, who is my friend, that's why I pick on him. He knows these people well. And he knows that the issues that he raised here today are the very issues that they are bringing and that we are trying to find solutions to. Mr. Speaker, in my Ministry of Finance, where a lot of these issues arise, we have been working from May 10th, and even more so lately, working with multilateral organizations to develop, to identify the bottlenecks in our entire business licensing, VAT, application and payment, our real property tax, our customs situation, processes. We have been working to find the bottlenecks and designing processes to eliminate those bottlenecks. We are identifying, and we have a project coming up now with the IDB where we want to bring in a information officer, chief information officer, to help us to design information flows from ministry to ministry, so that when somebody applies for a business license through a portal, one portal through Department of Inland Revenue or Central Revenue Agency or whatever it ends up being, that they don't have to go to sanitation or they don't have to go to physical planning or any of that. Because by the very nature of the application that they make, the system will identify what they require, what they need. And so the system will push a notification to the Ministry of Works. It'll push a notification to the Ministry of Health or to Environmental and say, an application in the system,
Exuma, you happy, right?
you need to do something. And it'll give a time period where they have to reply. Otherwise, somebody, a case manager, will do the follow-up. That's where we want to get to, right? So I take your point, Exuma. We have to do something different. We have to move the progress of our country forward. We've got to push this process forward, because we need to make it easier for both domestic and international investment to come into this country to help us to broaden our economic base, that'll help us to shave out some of the peaks and valleys that happen with these large investors, that will help us to develop the talent pool that we know is here, but it does not have the opportunities because it is very rare that you see a Bahamian who has the means taking the kind of risk that is involved in developing some of these industries. But if we are able to attract that talent, we know the talent is here to pick it up and to drive it and to eventually, like financial services, make it Bahamian. So again, as we go through the bill, and unfortunately I'm out of time, it's amazing how time goes, I just want to encourage the side opposite, that as you look at this, don't look at this from an immigration or narrow view of immigration, because that's not what it's about. This is about changing the paradigm in this country. It is about giving us an opportunity to grow. It's about recognizing the fact that we have a deficit of talent in this country to grow some of these niche markets, and that we need help to develop them. It is about recognizing that we have the ability, we have the tools, the basic tools, to diversify and to grow our economy, but we cannot do so by holding back and holding on to the past. We must move forward. We must give ourselves an opportunity, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I find it unfortunate, and I hope that the member for Exuma will rethink his statement that he cannot support this bill, given the fact that this is, again, not about immigration, but this is about progress. This is about making the ease of doing business, improving the ease of doing business, both for foreigners and for Bahamians, and this is about creating opportunity for Bahamians at the end of the day by expanding opportunity for our young people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I certainly, East Grand Bahama supports this bill.
As many the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House do suspend until 3 p.m. today, Wednesday the 22nd.
It's second. It's been moved and seconded that the business of the House suspend until 3 p.m.
Till 3 p.m.
Suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of the House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.